Release that witch. Episode 61, The Return. Just as Roland crouched on the ground, fitting the base in place, 3 figures suddenly emerged out of empty air, stumbling as they landed and tumbling to the ground together. Anna jumped in fright. A cluster of green flames swelled in the blink of an eye into a wall of fire, barring the space between them. Roland raised his head to look. One of the women was Nightingale, back after long days away. She looked thoroughly wretched, an unnatural flush on her cheeks, and though a cold wind blew outside, her forehead was covered in dense beads of sweat.
Your Highness, call Nanawa here, quickly.
She raised her head and cried out, anxiety written all over her face. Roland had already noticed. The woman tied to her back was deathly pale, eyes tightly shut. Half of one arm was gone entirely, and the cloth wrapped around the stump had been soaked dark red with seeping blood.
Katan, go to the medical academy and bring Nanawa now.
Yes, Your Highness.
Besides these 2, there was a young girl whom Nightingale had carried under her arm. She seemed largely unharmed, a pair of eyes curiously sizing up everything around her.
Are you hurt?
Roland stepped forward, untied the straps behind Nightingale's back, and lifted the wounded woman down.
I'm all right, Your Highness. I'm sorry. I couldn't bring back the Sisters of the Association.
She gasped the words out, her voice weak and strengthless, plainly. She had travelled long and hard, and her strength was nearly spent.
Don't say another word. Rest first.
Roland hoisted the unconscious, gravely wounded woman onto his shoulder, had Anna support Nightingale, and the 5 of them returned to the castle together. Nightingale's room was right next to Anna's. He ordered the maids to stoke up the fire and prepare a great tub of hot water. When Nanawa arrived, he gave brief instructions cleaning the wound before treatment, and so on, then left the room first.
So long as she wasn't dead, Nanawa could restore her wounds as before. Saving her life shouldn't be a problem. Nightingale had even brought the woman's severed arm back with her, but it had been starved of blood for a long time, and he had no idea whether it could still be reattached. The washing and treatment that followed required removing clothes. As someone raised under the red flag, Roland conscientiously chose to withdraw. But how did things come to this? Could the association camp have been attacked by demonic beasts, leaving only these 3 to escape? If so, that would be an immeasurable loss.
He paced uneasily outside the door. About half an hour later, the door was pushed open, and the first to come out was the young girl who had returned with Nightingale, looking entirely unscathed.
You're really just like Nightingale said.
What did she say about me?
A prince who cares for witches. Unfortunately, that news was simply too shocking, so most of the association didn't believe her. I didn't quite believe it either, to be honest. But, like my dad says, the world is so big, every kind of person exists. I'm Lightning, Your Highness. Good to meet you.
With that, she lowered her head and pressed the flat of her right hand against her left shoulder, some manner of salute, presumably. But Roland's mind was not on that. He had keenly caught the words most of them didn't believe her.
The association camp wasn't attacked by demonic beasts?
Attacked? No. Why would you ask? Ah, I see. The big sister with the broken arm is called Wendy. She was hurt by the association's mentor, Hakara.
And with that, Lightning recounted the whole affair in outline.
So, that was how it was. He had truly underestimated this world's cruel oppression of witches. Built up over long years, witches' distrust of the church and the high nobility had reached its peak, and Hakara was a radical among radicals. From Lightning's description, once this association leader gained enough strength, the first thing she'd want to do was likely to eradicate people like me. Still mercifully, Nightingale came back safe in the end. And not only that, she brought Border Town 2 more witches. As for the Model District project, Roland thought it over and decided to let Carl keep building, even if it went unused for now. There would be more witches sooner or later. Are you a member of the association too?
Not anymore. Same as Wendy and Nightingale now that we're out. There's no going back. Right now Hakara probably wants to swallow us whole, hearts and all.
She was run through the body by Nightingale and still survived?
Probably. The camp has a witch named Leaf who can multiply the potency of herbs several times over, with plenty of staunch wort and blood-mending drafts. Saving Hakara's life shouldn't be a big problem, but compared to your witch, the effect is far, far worse.
Now that was a troublesome business, he thought. Never mind being marked by the church, ending up marked by witches instead would be rather ironic. Luckily, the other's main goal was finding the holy mountain. For now, they likely had no leisure to make trouble for Nightingale. You said before that you didn't fully believe Nightingale either. So why flee the association with her?
Because of the black machine that goes huff huff puffing white steam, the grey powder that turns to stone when it touches water, and the snow powder that bursts out with a roar like thunder. A prince kind to witches might not exist, but these things she shouldn't be able to fake. You can't make up something that vivid. Call it an explorer's intuition. Oh, right, that big fellow I saw in the yard just now. Is that the white steam-puffing black machine? Nightingale seemed to call it a steam engine.
Explore?
That's right. Explorer. That's why I chose to come here with Nightingale. An explorer is curious about everything unknown.
Roland sighed inwardly. Was this what they called 8th grader syndrome? To pursue something beyond mere survival in this era, she had to come from a wealthy family. Look at that tomboy getup of hers. And that head of golden short hair. Are you sure your name isn't Ezreal?
Who's that? I'm Lightning.
The girl declared it with her head held high. Just then, Anna and Nanawa pushed the door open and came out.
How did it go? Did the treatment go smoothly?
Seeing Nanawa nod, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. As a rule, a severed limb had to be reattached within 6 to 8 hours. Past that limit, the success rate dropped sharply, and Lightning said their journey from the camp had taken nearly a full day. By then, the limb's end should have begun to wither. Conventional surgery could hardly have joined the nerves at all. One could only say Nanawa's healing ability was truly miraculous. The little girl looked somewhat weary as well. This treatment seemed to have cost her enormous effort. Roland encouraged her with a few words.
Well done. After dinner today, you'll sleep together with Anna.
And of course, he thought, Tegu Pine would have to be fetched over to the castle as well. Release That Witch. Episode 62, The Oath. After the day's events, Roland had no heart to go back to assembling the steam-boring machine. For dinner, he had the cook prepare an especially rich spread, black pepper steak, and fried eggs without limit. Anna and Lightning ate until their bellies swelled. Nanawa strove hard to keep her table manners, but in the end her little mouth still shone with grease. Besides the dining room's share, he had the maids fill heat-retaining porcelain with slow-stewed shredded meat and wheat porridge and sent it to Nightingale's room. Whenever they woke, warm food would be waiting. After dinner came the matter of rooms. Fortunately, Bordertown's previous lord had been particular about pomp. For a town born of mining and early warning, its castle was still built to the standard of a mid-sized town. In terms Roland was familiar with 900 square meters of living space, 3 stories with a split level, watchtowers and arrow towers at the 4 corners, front court and back garden included. Roland arranged Lightning's room across from Anna's. The room next door he meant to save for Wendy once she recovered. Seeing Nanawa stick to Anna like a piece of toffee as they went into the room, he could not help shaking his head with a smile. Back in his office, Roland poured himself a glass of ale. Plans could never keep up with changes. He had imagined that through Nightingale he would harvest a great wave of witches and light up every branch of the tech tree, chemical, agricultural, biological. He had not expected the association's leader to hold such hostility toward the noble class. Neutral parties like Nightingale and Lightning turned out to be the minority, and Wendy, by Lightning's account, she had not wanted to leave the association at all. She had only been carried here after being attacked by the snake witch Hakara for saving Nightingale.
2 it is, then. He drained the cup in one gulp. Better than none at all.
During dinner, he had asked Lightning in general terms about her ability and Wendy's. The little girl could fly freely through the air like a bird. Wendy could wield the power of wind. Neither ability was much use for climbing the tech tree, but used well, they could still do a great deal in the war to come. He had also asked around about the other witches at the camp. Their abilities were diverse, with no pattern to be found. Some effects could barely be explained by scientific theory. Others were simply inconceivable. Take the association's founder, Hakara the Snake Witch. She could condense magic into serpent form, and these vipers were no illusions. They could be touched, and they could attack. Different markings meant different venoms. From what Lightning had seen so far, there were at least two kinds: paralysis and death.
But Roland had noticed, be it Anna or Hakara, witches' magic mostly worked only at close range. Anna's green fire vanished abruptly past 5 meters. Hakara's vipers could not stray far from her body either. Nightingale's and Lightning's abilities had even shorter reach. To affect an outside object, they had to work through touch, which is why, facing a church army armed with crossbows and God's punishment stones, they had no choice but to scatter and flee.
He worked in the office until midnight. As the firelight in the hearth slowly dimmed, Roland sneezed and decided to go back to his room and sleep. Pushing open the bedroom door, he immediately sensed something amiss. The scene before him felt familiar. A woman sat at the head of his bed, half her figure shrouded in darkness, the firelight casting her shadow on the wall like a mural. But much was different. She wore not that unchanging robe, but ordinary casual clothes. And her face was no longer the stranger's of their first meeting, but familiar enough to name at a glance. Nightingale.
Roland instantly grew nervous. This setup? Could it be his luck was finally turning?
Nightingale saw the prince too. She rose and walked slowly over. After only half a day's rest, her complexion was already far better than when he had first seen her. Rosy cheeks had replaced the pallor, and her hair no longer looked dull and lifeless. A witch's powers of recovery were astonishing indeed. Roland coughed, breaking the silence.
You've worked hard. Why not rest a little longer? Lightning has already told me everything.
Nightingale shook her head. Roland vaguely felt something was off. Her expression was solemn. In her eyes lay an indescribable resolve. She has decided something, Roland realized. That steadfast look was rare, even on a man. He put away all other thoughts and waited in earnest for what she would say next. But Nightingale did not speak. She drew a deep breath, then went down on one knee, raised a short sword in both hands, and bowed her head slightly. A standard knight's salute, the right nobles performed when swearing fealty to a liege.
Your Highness, Roland Wimbledon, in the names of Nightingale and Veronica, I swear to you, so long as you treat witches kindly, I am yours to command a steadfast shield against the demons, or a keen blade that cleaves the night, without fear, without regret, until the last moment of my life.
So that was it, Roland thought. The association's actions had disappointed her deeply, and so she placed her hope of leading the witches forward onto him. As a transmigrator, he should by rights have refused. He was more used to working together by employment or cooperation. A step further, and those with shared ideals were comrades. But he knew, sometimes insisting on equality and freedom is meaningless. Without the right soil to grow in, even a sown seed will rot into the ground. As a prince, until the whole kingdom was unified, he could not break away from his own class.
Roland was silent for a moment. Then, as court etiquette had taught him, he took the short sword and touched the flat of its back lightly to her shoulder 3 times.
I accept your allegiance.
Nightingale's shoulders trembled faintly, as if she could finally relax. Then he extended his right hand to her. Nightingale took his fingers and pressed a light kiss upon the back of his hand. With that, the whole rite was complete. For a witch to perform the oath of fealty was thoroughly incongruous, yet the fact that she could carry through every motion at least proved Nightingale was no commoner by birth. And that Veronica she had spoken of.
Is that your real name? No family name?
Yes, Your Highness. I have no wish to hide it from you. 5 years ago, I left the Glan family. That surname no longer has anything to do with me.
Nightingale spoke frankly. She had lowered her last wall of defense against Roland and told him her past in brief. She had been born in Silverlight City, a city named for its rich silver mines. Her father was a viscount, her mother a woman of common birth. Such a marriage was uncommon, but the two got along in harmony. Besides that, Nightingale had a younger brother named Hyde. She spent her childhood in Silverlight City, and it was the happiest time of her life. Release That Witch, Episode 63, The Story of the Past. Sadly, the good times did not last. In the winter of her 14th year, refugee riots broke out in Silverlight City. Her father and mother, who had gone to hand out food to the refugees, never came back. Nightingale and her little brother were sent to another branch of the Glan family, the home of her father's own brother. And it was that same winter that Nightingale awakened as a witch. She hid her ability with the utmost care, but old Glan discovered it. He snatched her brother away from her side and used the boy's life to threaten Nightingale into serving him. Nightingale could only obey. Members of the Thieves Guild, found by old Glan, put her through special training. Then she did his dirty work, sneaking into trading rivals' homes to steal contracts and documents, eavesdropping on town hall meetings, and later, even slipping poison into the water jars and wine cups of potential competitors. The Glan family's business grew bigger and bigger, but his treatment of Nightingale grew worse by the day. At the slightest displeasure, he would beat and kick her. Except when she was out on his errands, he kept her shut in her room, its door refitted with iron bars. What grieved and puzzled Nightingale most was that her brother Hyde almost never came to see her anymore. She began to suspect old Glan had already murdered her brother. At her repeated pleading, the man brought her brother to her at last, his face full of loathing. But Hyde, wearing a look of disgust, told Nightingale he wished he had no sister like her. Witches should go down to hell and keep the devil's company. Nightingale broke down on the spot. But the nightmare was not over. Old Glan dealt her the final blow. The secret that she had become a witch. It was Hyde who had told him, precisely so he could leave the witch's side, as far away as possible. After seeing Hyde off, old Glan warned her coldly. Once her brother came of age, he would inherit their father's title. But if Nightingale did not keep obeying his orders, he could make the boy die without a sound at any time. And so, in despair and immense grief, Nightingale let the Glan family steer her like a puppet. In the snow month just before her adulthood, on the road back from a mission, she met Wendy, or rather Wendy found her. Learning that a witch cooperation association existed, that there were many sisters who had suffered misfortunes like hers, yet had not given up resisting tiny sparks of fire rekindled in Nightingale's broken heart. From confusion to resolve did not take her long. On her day of adulthood, a week later, she gritted her teeth and endured the torment, and her power changed beyond recognition. The mist no longer only hid her form. She found that iron bars could no longer stop her. When the symptoms of her adulthood had passed, she stepped one night, ghost-like, into old Glan's bedroom and opened his neck with a dagger. Watching the blood spurt several feet high, listening to his rattling gasps for air, she was surprised to find herself calmer than she had imagined. Then Nightingale left the Glan family. As for her brother Hyde, she no longer wanted anything to do with him, and so, together with Wendy, she set out on the journey to find the association. When Nightingale finished, she waited a moment. Seeing the prince still immersed in the story of the past, she took her leave first. It was a long while before Roland came back to himself. Every witch has a long and bitter history, he had to admit. Those who lived to adulthood were the outstanding few among them, and he to have crossed over and landed as a prince was lucky beyond measure. Early the next morning, Roland went to Nightingale's room to visit Wendy. After a full night's rest, Wendy's colour looked much better, and the reattached arm had regained its healthy hue. Though her body was still weak, she braced herself up and bowed her head to the prince. Roland drew a parchment from his bosom, getting straight to the point.
Nightingale has told me everything. Thank you for saving her life. There's no question Hakara can ever take you back into the association, so why not stay in Border Town and serve me? If you agree, sign this contract. The pay is the same as Anna's, 1 gold royal a month.
Your Highness! Nightingale blinked, wanting to speak but stopping. Roland naturally knew what she wanted to say. Toward this friend who had changed the course of her life, and then saved her life in the impassable mountains, Nightingale did not want him pressing Wendy into a decision so soon. In her view, let Wendy stay in Border Town a while, and she would surely come over to their side.
I would like not to rush this either, but some things grow more dangerous with every day of delay.
Roland paused a moment. Wendy did not interrupt. She waited quietly for him to go on.
I think I may have found the way for witches to pass the awakening day unharmed.
What?
At those words, both witches' expressions changed at once.
It's only a guess. I have no hard proof. The witches at your camp suffered less harm than you did in exile. The only difference. In exile, you hid your identities. Terrified of being known while at the camp, you had to keep using your abilities to keep the camp's daily life running.
What you say is not wrong.
And Anna at the castle trained her ability every single day. Before her day of adulthood, she even drained her magic dry and fell unconscious. When she woke, she had passed the hardest trial of a witch's life, safe and sound, without a scratch. So, I think this may be the key to the demon's bite. A witch is a vessel of magic. As she grows, the magic keeps building up. Once it passes the limit her body can bear, it turns and harms her. And the months of demons are precisely when a witch's power is at its strongest. If you can keep releasing your magic, holding it at a safe level, then perhaps the awakening day's torment will be greatly reduced or even vanish entirely. As Lord of Border Town, I can provide a place where witches freely unleash their power. No one will arrest you for it, put you on trial, or put you to death. If my guess proves right, then beyond all doubt, Border Town is the holy mountain you have sought for so long.
Witches were taught from birth that this dangerous ability was granted by the devil. Even the more clear-headed among them only felt that a power forever biting back at its owner was a curse in itself. It was a vicious circle. The less you wanted to use it, the stronger the backlash grew. But Roland, the transmigrator, saw this power in the opposite light. Having searched the fourth prince's memories and ruled out the existence of any true god, he simply regarded magic as a form of energy, a special power answerable to one's own will. Wendy was silent for a long time before she asked,
If I sign the contract and agree to serve you, may I ask, what must I do first?
Over these past centuries, some witches, for their unique abilities, were secretly imprisoned by ambitious men and used up like consumables. Though the church punished such acts severely, it could never stamp them out. And those men were ruthless in using witches. Once one lost her value, her fate was miserable beyond words. Roland had of course heard of such things, but what he valued was long-term interest, a sustainable system where both sides won. He smiled as he answered,
The first thing you must do is practice your ability, over and over, until you have mastered it completely, just like Anna.
Release That Witch. Episode 64. Curiosity. 3 days later, in the castle garden.
Onasish.
Nanawa tugged at Anna's sleeve. The latter turned her head.
Don't you think Nightingale's been acting kind of strange lately?
Strange? You mean her clothes?
Nightingale stood beside Roland. She wore not that never-washed robe of strange patterns, but the odd clothes invented by His Highness, the same as Anna's own. Though Anna hated to admit it, the other's tall figure showed off every strength of the outfit. Well-proportioned legs, a slender waist, and that head of long curls. With the cape and the pointed hat, anyone's eyes would land on her first.
It's not the clothes. Don't you think the way she talks to His Highness and the way she looks at him have both changed from before?
Have they?
Fine, Anna. Don't blame me for not warning you later.
What was that about? Anna shook her head, paid her no more mind, and turned her attention to the other two new witches instead. The one called Lightning looked Nanawa's age, but dressed remarkably differently. Anna counted roughly. At least a dozen pockets were sewn onto that rag of a jacket. As for the other witch, Wendy, she, too, no longer wore the patterned robe identical to Nightingale's from their first meeting, but ordinary women's clothes. Yet one thing caught Anna's attention in particular. The other's bosom was truly magnificent. Having trained two witches before, Roland was practiced and at ease by now.
Since you've both agreed to sign the contract, let's begin your first training. Lightning, you first.
Go.
Lightning raised her hand and walked out of the shed. Outside, light snow was falling, windless. The girl floated easily up into mid-air, waiting for Roland's next instruction.
First, let's test your top flying speed.
Watch this.
She flashed a thumbs up, struck a sprinter's starting pose, then began to circle the castle at speed.
Roland gauged her speed by eye. About 60 to 80 kilometers per hour, by the standard of his years driving the highway back to his hometown. For flight alone, that was not fast about the pace of an ordinary pigeon. But he had heard she had carried both Nightingale and Wendy on the way back. That was rather more impressive. What did taking off with 100 kilograms of payload even mean? In Roland's mind rose the image of a piston plane carrying a 100-kilo bomb.
But the tests that followed shattered his lovely fantasy. Once the load passed 50 kilograms, about 110 pounds, Lightning's flying altitude dropped sharply from over 100 meters down to 10 or so. And with a load near 100 kilograms, she could barely fly 2 meters off the ground.
Which meant, to turn Lightning into a bomber, even with a charge of only a few kilos, her altitude would put her within range of the enemy's heavy crossbows. But Roland quickly thought of a new use for the girl. Be it reconnaissance or artillery spotting, she was the perfect candidate. And the encirclement plan that had stumped him for so long now seemed to show its first glimmer of dawn.
While the prince tested Lightning's ability, Wendy watched him quietly from the side.
Since leaving the convent, in 15 long years of wandering, she had seen a great many people, commoners, farmers, craftsmen, soldiers, nobles. They were all as if cast from one mould. Before they knew she was a witch, they showed longing and admiration. But the moment they learned she was a witch, that longing and admiration turned instantly to fear and loathing, along with an evil desire that made Wendy want to vomit. She had thought that in this life she would only ever keep company with witches and could never again draw near any man. That was why she had meant to refuse Nightingale, not out of distrust, but out of a fear from within. But Roland Wimbledon had changed her mind. The way he looked at her was simply too ordinary, as if he had witnessed it all 1,000 times before. When she first met Roland in Nightingale's room, she had thought he was hiding it extremely well, helped by Nightingale's presence. But in the days that followed, his manner remained the same. Could it be that His Highness's standards were simply far above those of ordinary nobles? And that contract, Wendy had assumed it was a mere formality. But when she unrolled it and read, she found it written full of dense clauses, stipulating not only duties, but the rights she held. It was simply beyond belief. Taking witches under his banner without stripping their freedom would already have been boundless generosity, and he actually wrote her rights into the contract? Clause 2.1, for example, the first time Wendy had ever seen that way of writing, said she could have paid leave. By the explanation of the terms below, it meant she could take money without working. The next clause. The witch shall complete the experimental projects arranged by the employer, but when part of a project feels beyond her or causes her discomfort, she may request a change or file a refusal. And the next. The employer shall provide and guarantee the witch's safety, lodging, food, and pay. Should any of these fail to be met, the witch may unilaterally terminate the contract. The clauses read a bit awkwardly, but the meaning was plain. A witch who signed was not the prince's personal possession. She held rights equal to her duties. In this contract, she felt his sincerity. Were it only for form's sake, there would be no need to write the terms in such detail. At the thought, Wendy could not help looking toward Nightingale. She knew the other's story well, and understood her bone-deep loathing of nobles. Yet now, when Nightingale talked with Roland, her tone and bearing held an emotion of a different kind, a change Nightingale herself probably hadn't noticed. She had left the main body to go alone to Bordertown, and a mere 2 months together, only 2 months, and Nightingale had come to trust this man completely. Judging by her willingness to break with the association rather than abandon Bordertown in her heart, His Highness Roland Wimbledon likely held more hope of giving witches a true home than the association did. The mentor's way of doing things was heartbreaking too. That founder of the association seemed to have forgotten how hard won every surviving sister's life was. Wendy knew she could never go back. Since fate had brought her here, why not trust Nightingale's choice one more time, just as she had trusted her countless times before? And with her mind made up, she could not let herself be outdone by her juniors, could she?
Wendy, she came back to herself with a start, to find Lightning's test already over and everyone watching her. She gave an apologetic smile and walked toward the outside. Just then, from the west came the droning of the horn once more. The sound echoed among the mountains, breaking the little town's tranquility. Release That Witch. Episode 65. An Ill Omen. The horn had sounded several times before, mostly packs of a few dozen demonic beasts trickling up to attack the border, which the militia had learned to handle with practiced ease. So Roland was not flustered. He announced a halt to the training, sent Wendy and Lightning back to the castle to rest, had Anna escort Nanawa to the medical academy to await the wounded, and set off for the wall himself with Nightingale.
Hold on. As an explorer, I've been on the continent's western frontier this long without once seeing a full-scale demonic beast assault with my own eyes. If word got out, I'd have no face left as an explorer. I demand to come along.
Roland rejected the protest without a moment's hesitation and charged Wendy to keep an eye on Lightning. While the beasts ran rampant, she was strictly forbidden from running about. Then he looked to Nightingale. The latter nodded, stepped forward, took Roland's hand, and stepped into the mist, heading straight for the wall. Ever since learning that Nightingale could bring whatever she touched into the mist with her, Roland had fallen in love with this way of travel at once. Straight through obstacles, heedless of terrain, several meters a step, it had a certain go, anywhere I please, thrill. Arriving at the foot of the wall, Roland found a deserted corner, stepped out of the mist, and walked up to the defense line alone. The distant field was a sheet of white. He saw no grand assault of demonic beasts. A false alarm? He was not the only one thinking. Discussion rose among the militiamen filing into position. The prince found Ironaxe only to see him gazing into the distance with a face of utter gravity, the horn still clutched tightly in his hand.
Was it you who sounded the alarm?
Yes, Your Highness. Look, that thing has come.
His voice was much drier than usual. That thing? Roland strained his eyes into the distance. At the very limit of vision, a black dot showed faintly hard to spot even against the pure white background. By regulation, the assembly horn was blown only when the patrol judged the threat beyond them. But Iron Axe was a seasoned hunter. He must have his reasons.
It's a hybrid. The one I ran into 6 years ago.
Is that so? Roland frowned. In theory, demonic beasts all died attacking Longsong's stronghold. They had no intelligence, no concept of retreat. The stronghold had never been breached, yet this one had not died. It had lived on. 6 years later, an ill premonition crept up in his heart.
Then again, at this distance, even he could barely make out a black dot, while Iron Axe could clearly tell the beast's kind. Such eyesight was simply astonishing. Perhaps he had misjudged it, the prince thought.
The beast did not keep Roland waiting long. It began closing in on the wall, and soon everyone noticed the oddly shaped target. It was not huge-bodied like the last hybrid. At first glance, it looked like an enlarged feline, but its back bore a pair of fleshy wings, lying covered against its torso when not spread. Its head resembled a lion's, except that it had 2 pairs of eyes. If that extra pair was not decorative, it could catch movement across most of its rear without turning its head. Carter and several hunters had already loaded their ammunition and stood ready. But the lion-shaped hybrid did not charge straight in. It stopped beyond crossbow range and looked all around.
That distance fell within the flintlock's effective range, but the chance of a first shot hit was nearly 0.
Before long, it suddenly leapt to the left. Its wings spread, lifting that huge body wholly into the air. Just as Iron Axe had said, it could fly or glide for short distances. Vaulting the obstacles, the hybrid beast ran swiftly toward the undefended stretch at the wall's western end.
Roland's heart skipped. The ill feeling had come true. To judge an opponent's strength by observation and choose the weak point to strike, that was proof of intelligence. And intelligence was precisely what beasts lacked. They might sometimes strike at a prey's weakness, but that was instinct passed down over millions of years. Facing an unknown opponent, they had no way to judge at all, let alone analyze multiple targets together. And what does intelligence mean? Mankind, by dint of an outstanding brain and remarkable endurance, clawed its way from the raw flesh-eating savanna to the very top of the food chain. Roland dared not think it through. He waved for the chief knight to follow him. The other hunters would go with Iron Axe to snipe the beast.
It reached the unmanned section, leapt straight up, flipped easily onto the wall, then ran for the residential district, treating the hunter company as if they were thin air.
Damn beast! Militia of the second wall section with me. Reserves, take the wall and hold it for now.
By now, he could no longer care that the militia had only trained to thrust in place moving might tear gaps in the formation, letting the beast strike them piecemeal. Carter led the guards close on the prince's heels. Their individual fighting power was the strongest, able to fill any breach that might appear. And at the very rear came the musket squad, led by Iron Axe. Inside the old district, the view was blocked by rows of single-story houses. The roads were narrow and covered in snow, greatly hampering everyone's movement. Roland dared not split the team to search. They could only thread the crisscrossing alleys, hoping to find the beast's trail.
He regretted not bringing lightning. With a witch scouting from the air, they would not be scurrying about like headless flies.
After about a quarter hour of searching, a townsman's scream suddenly rang out from deep in the alleys. The team wheeled toward the sound at once. Thankfully, most of the militia were old district residents. With a clear destination, they threaded the lanes with practiced ease, even cutting straight through people's backyards. When they reached the scene, Roland saw a man bitten clean in two. His innards spilled across the ground, plainly already dead.
Heavens! It's Iron Fork. I know him. Damn it, did it run? Look out. To the right.
Suddenly, someone shouted. Before the words had faded, a black shadow swept out of the wooden house on the right. Amid a burst of flying splinters, it smashed straight through the house's wall and pounced into the unprepared ranks, pinning a militiaman under its foreclaws, jaws gaping down to bite. Iron Axe reacted first. He tried to raise his gun and fire, but found the scattering militia had choked the alley solid. He had no clean shot. he could only squeeze through the crowd, step by step toward the target. The other hunters saw the same problem. Clamping their guns under their arms, they jumped to catch the eaves and scrambled up onto the roofs in twos and threes. The hybrid cared nothing for the spears thrusting at it. It spread its wings, parried the panicked stabs, picked up the blood-soaked militiaman in its jaws and gathered itself to leap away when the guns spoke. Several black blossoms of blood burst across the monster's body. Struck by the lead shot, the hybrid roared in fury. It flung aside the prey in its mouth and spread its wings to hurl itself at the hunters on the rooftops. And just then Ironax squeezed clear of the crowd. Right in front of the beast, he raised his gun fast and pulled the trigger. At point-blank range, there was no missing. The powder gas even sprayed the monster's nose. The bullet left the muzzle with undiminished speed, drove straight through the target's eye, and plunged into its skull. The hybrid demonic beast went rigid all over and toppled to the ground. Release That Witch. Episode 66. The Battle of Hermes. Part 1. Icy rain drifted down, thinning the stench of blood that hung over the holy city. Alicia leaned on her greatsword, gasping violently for breath. This was not her first battle on the Hermes defense line, but she had never imagined that the new holy city itself might one day fall. The wall was utterly finished.
Alicia had never seen such a horrifying monster. A giant insectoid hybrid had burst out from beneath the earth. Its body pressed against the glacier cliffs, bony claws hooking into the wall face like barbs, climbing step by step toward the top of the wall, while its body had yet to fully emerge from the ground.
Had it only been enormous, that would have been one thing, but no one had expected the monster to open its gaping maw and vomit out a great heap of hybrid demonic beasts. The wall top exploded into chaos. The once orderly ranks were shattered by the beast's charge. Alicia's Judgment Army Vanguard Battalion was cut to pieces. She watched comrade after comrade swallowed by the beasts, powerless to help. Warm human blood and the monster's black blood mingled, running along the cracks between the flagstones. As the horn sounded the retreat, the catapults emplaced within the holy city started up. Granite blocks half a man high rained down from the sky, heedless of the fact that the wall top still held plenty of their own people and the kingdom's soldiers. All Alicia remembered was one boulder smashing squarely into Captain Ducato, who had been guarding her side. When she picked herself up off the ground, she saw him, embedded armor and all into the cracked, sunken flagstones, his body like a crumpled sheet of parchment, intestines spilling from the split in his belly, steaming blood pooling into a small puddle beneath him.
Had she not thrown herself aside before the stone landed, her end would likely have been the same as his, she thought.
As for how she had finally cut her way out of the encirclement and fallen back below the wall, Alicia could no longer clearly recall. Everywhere around her were screams and curses. Everyone swung their weapons in a frenzied slaughter, and no one could tell whether they were fighting the beasts or their own companions. Of a Judgment Army company of over 100, those who survived herself numbered only 12.
What do we do now, Captain? Captain Alicia.
Alicia snapped back to herself. Right by Judgment Army regulations, if a leader falls in battle, the deputy takes up the post and leads the soldiers on. She bit her lip until a taste of iron filled her mouth.
We go to the holy city's north gate. If the beasts want to break into the new holy city, they have to pass through there.
The order meant yielding the whole residential district between the wall and the inner city. But she had no choice. Nothing mattered more than the heart of the church, Hermes Cathedral.
And there was one sentence she left unsaid. If even the glacier cliffs couldn't stop these monsters, what difference could she and her remaining 11 make? Perhaps today was the day she gave her life to the kingdom of heaven. May you be merciful, she prayed in her heart. Then she shouted aloud, "The Judgment Army never gives up. Move out."
The Judgment Army never gives up.
The 12 of them formed a column and jogged toward the north gate. Behind them, the sounds of slaughter around the wall slowly weakened and finally vanished into the wind and rain. Reaching the north gate, Alicia saw quite a number of Judgment Army troops already gathered before the drawbridge. It seemed everyone had reached the same conclusion, which made her feel a little better. But at this critical moment, the drawbridge was down. Alicia frowned, walked up to a handsome warrior in the regulation red robe of a judgment judge, and saluted with a fist to her chest.
Lord Judge, I am Alicia Quinn, leader of the 4th Squad, Vanguard Battalion.
I am Tucker Thor, in charge of the North Gate defense. Well done. We've set up a first aid station behind the gate. If your people have wounded, you can send them over.
My lord, I don't understand why isn't the drawbridge raised at a time like this? The beasts on the wall could swarm down at any moment. We must keep the inner city from falling.
Calm yourself, Captain. I know you and your soldiers do not fear sacrifice, but a meaningless sacrifice accomplishes nothing. The church is far from its final hour. Go to the assembly point and stand by. If you've run out of cold-repelling pills, remember to ask the quartermaster for more.
Only when the judge said so did Alicia realize how frozen she was. After breaking away from the battlefield, the sweat on her body had mixed with the icy rain, nearly sealing her whole body in ice. The biting wind blew straight into her face, and she could not stop shivering. She pulled the sheepskin pouch from her inner pocket and shook it over her palm, but only some sticky liquid dribbled out. She must have crushed the pills in the fighting. She sighed, raised her head, and found a brownish-red, cold-repelling pill held out before her.
Take mine first. You can pay me back later.
Maybe neither of us will get the chance to eat another one of these.
Alicia did not stand on ceremony. She took the pill, crushed it between her teeth, and swallowed it down.
True, and that would be fine too. These things taste awful.
As soon as he finished, a powerful stench surged up from Alicia's stomach. Even a battlefield heaped with corpses could not emit so sickening a smell. She felt what she had swallowed was no pill, but a lump of long-rotted flesh and blood. An unbearable sour numbness welled from her belly through her whole body, then the cold abruptly receded, replaced by a scorching warmth flowing along her veins. Her body heat gradually returned. The frozen sweat began to slide again. Wisps of white vapor rose from the top of her head, and her numb toes found feeling once more.
But not today. The God's Punishment Army is on its way from the cathedral. The beasts will not get past the north gate. Take your people to the assembly ground and remember to check their pills. Don't end up like you did, finding out they're gone right when you need them.
The God's Punishment Army, the church's most elite force. She had heard of them for a long time, but never seen them with her own eyes. But even if the God's Punishment Army was as mighty as the rumors said, they were still human, weren't they? With a body of flesh and blood, no amount of training could let one easily overcome a great pack of hybrid demonic beasts.
But, since the judge had said so, she had no choice but to lead her 11 soldiers away from the north gate toward the assembly ground to the west. Several hundred withdrawn Judgment Army troops had already gathered there. They stood in 3s and 2s in the rain, letting the rainwater run down their cheeks. Some simply sat on the ground, listless. Only a small number still stood in orderly ranks, awaiting enemies that might appear at any moment.
Had it been a few days ago, Alicia would surely have stepped forward to berate them. But now, she too was lost in bewilderment. To build this new holy city, countless compatriots had been buried here. You could say every brick and tile held the blood of believers and Judgment Army alike. The bishops often said, "Hold Hermes, and you hold the kingdom of God on earth." Yet today, that kingdom of God seemed about to fall into the claws of the devil's minions.
The beasts are coming, ready for battle,
someone shouted. Alicia forced her spirits up, raised her greatsword, and fixing her eyes on the black shadows speeding closer through the sky, cried out loudly,
For Hermes.
For the new holy city.
Release That Witch. Episode 67. The Battle of Hermes Part 2. But the anticipated final battle never happened. A man walked up in front of the woman warrior and pressed down her sword hilt.
Stand down, all of you. The God's Punishment Army is here.
His voice was not loud, but clear and forceful. Alicia noticed he belonged to that one unit still standing in orderly ranks. On his arm guard he wore the sash of a regiment commander. She turned her head. Not far away, a file of tall warriors was coming out through the north gate. They wore gleaming full plate, reflecting a silvery sheen in the soaking rain. Crimson capes hung from their backs. Their weapons varied, some with shield and sword, some with halberd or battle axe. After crossing the drawbridge, they did not reform their ranks, but spread out, heading straight to meet the oncoming beasts.
What kind of fighting method was this? It was simply madness. Facing hybrid demonic beasts whose strength and speed far surpassed mankind's, only by holding formation and striking with the strength of all could one win. This stance of theirs, did they mean to fight one-on-one? And were they just going to let the God's Punishment Army fight alone while they stood aside and watched? We have to go support them.
No, we just watch. If we rush in recklessly, we'll only hold them back.
Hold them back? Alicia glared at the man in anger. Had she misjudged him? Was he only a coward clinging to life? She gripped her sword hilt, preparing to go around him and join the battle. Though she was full of confusion about the new holy city's future, facing the enemy now, the only thing she could do was die on the battlefield. Before she had taken 2 steps, the woman warrior saw a sight she could not believe. A flying abomination dove down from the sky. Its appearance was as terrifying as a messenger of hell. Huge wings covered in grey feathers, a full 12 feet across when spread. Its head was like a bird's, yet bore a pair of goat's horns. The barbs on its 2 claws could cut into a warrior's breastplate. A vertical plunge from high above was their customary attack, hidden and terribly hard to defend. Even a heavy shield held in both hands would be bowled over by it. The tremendous impact would shatter the shield-bearer's arm bones and crush his chest, an almost certainly fatal blow. The only answer was to roll outward the instant the creature was about to hit the ground, for any chance of dodging the vicious strike. But the God's Punishment warrior did not dodge. One silver-armored warrior set himself in a front-facing stance, and the instant the creature pounced before him, stretched out both hands and pressed his palms flat against the pads of its claws. The force of the collision was so great it sounded like the blast of a snow powder salute barrel. A cloud of mist flew up from man and monster. The armor creaked and twisted. His right leg bent, left leg straight, his body stretched into a line pointing at the sky, and the creature, for a moment, could not crush him down. Then another warrior hurled a short javelin at the pinned flying abomination so fast that Alicia saw only a streak of silver light. The javelin pierced the monster's skull with precision, smashing it to pieces. The silver-armored warrior tossed the still-twitching corpse to the ground. His arm bent at an unnatural angle, clearly that interception had not been without cost. The bone was broken, yet he drew the axe at his waist as if nothing had happened, and charged to kill other beasts.
Fighting these monsters with nothing but human strength, Alicia could hardly believe her eyes. Several hundred God's Punishment warriors plunged into the swarming tide of beasts. Their crimson capes became a flood of blood, forcibly halting the enemy's advance. Now she understood what the regiment commander meant by holding them back. These warriors could each fight 10 at once. Every one of them had strength, agility, and reaction speed, rivaling a hybrid demonic beast, no, even greater. Ordinary beasts were nearly helpless before them.
That was incredible.
Alicia felt a heartfelt joy. With such brave and mighty warriors, Hermes Cathedral could never fall.
Ah,
Right, I haven't asked your name. I'm Alicia Quinn, captain of the Judgment Army. You seem to know the God's Punishment Army's fighting power all along?
The other glanced at her, his eyes as devoid of warmth as the icy rain. He did not give his name, only saying in a low voice,
My brother is a God's punishment warrior.
At the very top of the cathedral, Bishop Mayne raised a spyglass. This was the highest point of the new holy city. With the fjord merchant's far-seeing tool, one could overlook most of the battlefield.
It seems we've won. Tell the catapults to stop. The God's Punishment Army is about to take the wall top.
Wasn't victory a foregone conclusion? The key point is the armies of the four kingdoms are finished.
Another spoke. He wore the same golden bishop's robes as Mayne, only his voice was far older.
Exactly. With that, their border defenses are as good as empty. 5,000 odd, well-equipped, well-trained standing troops and nearly 1,000 knights even replaced at once. It would take 4 to 5 years. What a brilliant extermination gambit.
The last speaker was the youngest of the three, a woman of barely 30 and the only woman among the 3 archbishops. She gave a moan of appreciation and smacked her lips.
But to achieve this, we also lost a great many Judgment Army soldiers. They were the church's backbone. If this plan weren't the fastest way to results, I truly would not have wanted to throw them into this purgatory.
We had no other choice. The wildland beasts have appeared, exactly as the Holy Book records. Time is running out. If we cannot unify the whole continent and gather our strength as one, what awaits us is only destruction.
Actually, destruction isn't so bad. Humans are greedy, vicious, and mercenary, waving the banner of righteousness while doing things more terrible than demonic beasts. Perhaps even the devils of hell are kinder than we are.
Heather, that kind of talk is simply heresy. Do you mean to defy the will of God?
No need to trouble yourself over it, Lord Tevin. The one in charge of the arbitration court is me, not you. Besides, did God ever ask us to survive? How do you know his venerable self doesn't care more for the devils?
You.
Enough. Tevin, Heather. That's all for today. I will report the situation to the Pope shortly. You two go and attend to your own duties.
When the two had left, Mayne stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing north. Behind the gap in the impassable mountains lay the snow-covered land of eternal winter. Farther west still lay the wildlands. There was where everything began. He knew Bishop Tevin was right. God's punishment warriors were far too rare. Only those of unswerving loyalty to the Holy See, possessed of tenacious willpower, could undergo the conversion. Over nearly 100 years, the church had accumulated barely 1,000 of them. To fight the demons, that number was far from enough. But the whole of the north could provide only so many. For more warriors, there was no choice but to unify the continent. And of course, Bishop Heather was equally right. As the church's arbiter, she had judged villains and witches beyond count. And among those villains and witches, even the most bloodthirsty had not killed as many as this one deliberately staged miserable victory. The higher one's place in the church, the more clearly one could feel it. God is neither good nor evil, neither righteous nor wicked. How do you know his venerable self doesn't care more for the devils? At the thought of Heather's words, Mayne could not help laughing aloud. Only she could leave Lord Tevin speechless with rage. No god neither shelters mortals nor cares for devils. He favors only the winning side. Release That Witch. Episode 68. The Funeral. On a patch of wasteland southwest of Bordertown, a funeral was being held. To call it wasteland was no longer quite right. At some point, the untended plot had been ringed with a low wall of rubble stone. Thick snow covered the wall top. From afar, it looked plated with a rim of silver. Though one could step over it with ease, the sight of it always made Vanner think of the border wall, the same color, the same shape.
He had only heard of such rites from traveling merchants. When some great noble or member of royalty died, the family would gather at the cemetery, sad music would play, condolences were received, and at last, the coffin was lowered into the earth. The higher the rank, the grander the affair. Even the dead outshone the living. He had thought enviously back then. What happened when someone died in Border Town? You dug a pit by the misty forest and filled it in. Who knew whether, come the months of demons, the beasts had dug the bodies out and eaten them? Death was no stranger to Border Town's residents, especially every winter, when they went to Longsong Stronghold for shelter, huddled in the slum shacks, dying of hunger and cold, of sickness and wounds that was the norm. No one had leisure to grieve. Better to spend the strength begging for another piece of bread in the city center at dawn. But today, His Highness was actually holding a funeral for a soldier. They said he had been knocked down while pursuing the hybrid demonic beast, and lost half his head to its bite. Vanner knew the unlucky fellow, an old face of the old district, nameless. Everyone called him Aji. He had a wife and 2 children, the elder about 6, the younger barely walking. In normal times, this family would be finished. The woman could find another man to live with, but who would take on 2 burdens? Either the little ones got dumped by the roadside to fend for themselves, or she raised them while soliciting at the tavern until some strange disease took her. But the prince seemed to truly mean to honor the promise he had made when recruiting the militia. Those killed in action would not only receive their full pay, but an extra compensation. What was it called again? Vanner thought, right, a pension, and the sum was as much as 5 gold royals. On top of that, set amounts of food and charcoal would be issued every month, meaning Aji's wife could raise the 2 children without working at all. Well, such fine-sounding words might only be comfort, but gold royals were real and solid. He had seen with his own eyes the prince hand the pension to the chief knight, and the chief knight pass it to Ajay's wife. Damn it, why did he suddenly feel a bit envious of Ajay? No. Vanner shook his head again and again, driving the foolish thoughts out. He had no intention of dying and leaving things cheap for his wife, who would most likely become someone else's wife.
When the money was given out came His Highness's address. It was short, but Vanner took in every word, especially the sentence for the sacrifice made to protect family and the innocent, we will remember forever. It set a warm current surging in his chest.
So that was how it is, he thought. No wonder that lately, besides bread and silver wolves, he kept feeling there was something more to strive for. At least this winter, they were surviving on their own 2 hands, not on Longsong Stronghold's charity.
The last part was the burial. Ajay's coffin was lowered into the dugout pit. The chief knight had everyone form lines, and every militiaman, regular or reserve, took a turn stepping forward to shovel in a scoop of earth. Queuing was second nature to them all. Over 200 men formed 4 columns at once. When Vanner's turn came, he suddenly felt the shovel grow a little heavier, and the watching eyes of his teammates slowed every one of his motions. And when he stepped aside, his gaze passed that same feeling on to the next man covering the earth. Ajay's tombstone was a pure white rectangular stone. Vanner could not read a single word on it. And Ajay was not the first to move into this wasteland either. Beside him stood another stone tablet, exactly the same, snow covering its top. As everyone filed away, Vanner saw Brian, the 2nd Militia Company's new captain, slowly pour a jug of ale over that tombstone.
If this place were to be his final resting place, it didn't look half bad. He could not help thinking.
Your Highness, the way you're doing this...
Improper?
No, I can't put it into words. I only feel no one has ever treated levied commoners this way. They have no title, no lineage. Some don't even have a surname or a name.
But it still feels good to you, doesn't it?
Roland smiled. Of course, he knew how strongly all this struck Carter, whose own calling was fighting and protecting. When people begin to think about whom they fight for and why they fight, a unit undergoes unimaginable change. And for Carter, it meant this. When honor was no longer the noble's exclusive privilege, when common folk who had nothing could, through his training and teaching, earn honor by defending their home. The redoubled sense of achievement was beyond words.
Of course, the public funeral was only a beginning, Roland thought. He had many more means to build collective honor. A military banner, an anthem, heroes held up as examples. No spirit is born from nothing. Only by keeping at it day after day, instilling the idea at every moment, would it gradually take effect. To make sure the aftermath system ran reliably, he even set up an aftermath group staffed by 3 parties himself, the town hall and the militia, to see the follow-up grain and charcoal issued in full.
The further he went down this road, the heavier Roland felt his shoulders grow. There was far too much Bordertown lacked. Mining and livelihoods seemed on track. Grain reserves were ample. So far, not one person had starved or frozen to death. To other towns, this was already a miracle. Even in Greycastle's capital, every winter culled many refugees and orphans.
But what he wanted was far more than this. The town hall's workload had reached its limit. Assistant Minister Barov and the dozen-odd apprentices he had brought were holding up all of Bordertown's finances and administration. To expand the departments any further, he had to recruit some administrative staff.
He had asked Barov whether he had any promising students or colleagues still in the capital. The answer was a bucket of cold water.
Even if there were, they wouldn't be willing to come. Does your highness really know how bad your reputation in the capital is?
Well, that did sound rather convincing, he thought glumly.
Back in the castle's backyard, Nightingale stepped out of the mist and gave Wendy, waiting outside the wooden shed, a warm embrace. Lightning, meanwhile, was circling the unfinished steam boring machine. Seeing Roland, she immediately clamored to join in assembling this machine rumored to move on its own. Watching it all, he suddenly felt that everything he had put in was worth it. Release That Witch. Episode 69, Casting the Cannon. 4 days later, in the backyard of the calcination shed at the North Slope mine, 2 deep holes had been dug into the yard's ground. Each was round, narrow at the top, and wide at the bottom, a front inner diameter of about 20 centimeters, widening to 26 at the rear. These holes were the molds Roland meant to cast the cannon blanks in. Anna had baked the inner walls, sintering the surface layer of earth into a hole, as if applying a shell. Pointing the powder chamber downward gave better wall quality in casting the higher up, the more slag and bubbles gathered. Every dimension of the holes had been worked backward from the cannonball. He roughly remembered that the so-called 6-pounders and 8-pounders of history were named by the weight of their shot. So he first cast a few 12-pound iron balls, then added the barrel's wall thickness to the ball's diameter to get the mold's inner diameter. With measuring tools lacking, Roland simply defined his own standard. He cut an iron bar about as wide as the nail of his ring finger, made that the base unit 1 centimeter, and used it to make iron bars of other sizes, with graduation lines engraved on them. The 12-pound iron ball measured about 12 centimeters across under the crude iron bar ruler. He set the barrel wall's thinnest point at 4 centimeters, and to prevent bursting, the powder chamber at the rear got 7. That gave the mold's inner diameter. As for length, he knew cannons had a caliber-to-length ratio, but all he could recall were the main guns of battleships and main battle tanks. Of antique muzzle-loaders' ratios, he truly had no idea.
Considering that a shorter barrel is lighter and saves material, Roland waved a grand hand and settled on 1.50 meters. If the test firing disappointed, he could always adjust later.
When cannon were first invented, iron strips were ringed around a wooden core, sealed with iron powder, reinforced with iron hoops, and finally the core in the bore was burned away, much like a storage barrel. Roland, of course, knew such cannon risked leaking and bursting, so he went straight for integral casting, with the bore drilled out by the boring machine. For the steam boring machine, drilling a 6-pounder or a 12-pounder made no essential difference.
In the spirit of caliber is justice, he naturally chose the bigger muzzle, the thicker barrel, the 12-pounder. Any bigger and it would no longer serve as a field gun. Whether the shot's weight was reckoned in lead or iron hardly mattered, so long as it could be fired out. He was borrowing from history. After all, not building a scale model. Let's begin.
Roland took a deep breath and said to Anna. The latter nodded, grabbed a steel ingot, and hung it suspended over the mouth of the hole. Green flame flared, the ingot swiftly turned red, then melted, forming a slender waterfall of molten steel flowing into the hole. The surface of the melt glowed red-orange. The core turned white-hot, a brightness hard to look at straight. To protect the witch's eyes, Roland had even set up a support by the hole's mouth. She need only fix her position beforehand, rest her arm on the padded brace, and there was no need to stare at the molten steel to see whether it flowed into the hole. These steel ingots had been slowly stockpiled over ordinary days. Anna alone could not usher in the age of mass steelmaking, but small batch production was well within her power. With the hardest threshold temperature solved, the stir-frying method yielded fairly good steel.
This was also why Roland dared set his own barrel dimensions. Compared to cast iron and bronze barrels, cast steel plainly had higher strength. Even if a dimension was off, the gun would not burst easily.
As the molten steel slowly rose, the stockpiled ingots dwindled at flying speed, a sight that pained Roland not a little. When would he finally raise a forest of chimneys and blast furnaces on his land, and smelt more steel than he could use? For a long stretch of history, steel output was one measure of a great power's strength. He was feeling it firsthand now. When both molds were filled, Anna's cheeks had gone bright red. Roland drew out his handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat from the tip of her nose. At the very beginning, Anna would still show some resistance. Now she stayed obediently still, eyes closed, letting Roland do as he would. Her falling bangs were rimmed red in the molten steel's glow. Her soft neck made one want to take a bite. When he stood over her like this, the half-length of slender collarbone showing through her collar would enter his view. Up close, he could even catch the faint fragrance coming off her.
Ahem. Alright, that's enough for today. Well done. I'll tell the kitchen to give you an extra black pepper steak at dinner. Not yet, he thought. Doing more would smack of taking advantage of her situation. Wait a while longer until she has truly gained her freedom.
Anna opened her eyes. Though the sweat had been wiped away, her face seemed redder than before. She nodded at Roland and gave a soft Over the days that followed, Roland went back and forth between the castle and the North Slope mining district. Besides the barrels, he needed a sufficient number of boring cutters. These drilling tools were made much as the barrels were. Their diameter exactly matched the cannonballs. Out of the mold, Anna heated them again, and they were hammered into shape. They looked quite unlike ordinary spiral bits at first glance, like blunt-headed iron rods. The only difference? A notch hammered out at the top to let metal shavings escape. Last came quenching, to harden the cutter. Unlike the high-precision bits of a modern boring machine, Roland only needed an iron rod that could punch a hole. Allowing for the high wear rate, he and Anna made 5 crude boring cutters within a week. By then, the steam boring machine had already fully proven its ability. The output of cast iron musket barrels had jumped from 2 a month to 10 a day. When all was ready, the miners dug the cannon blanks out of the earthen pits, cleaned the surface slag away, and loaded them onto a wagon bound for the smithy. These 2 blanks had nearly emptied Roland's stockpile of steel. Calling them priceless was no exaggeration. For the trip, the prince ordered Carter and 2 knights to stand guard the whole way.
Which struck the chief knight as rather superfluous. Who would come steal something so dead heavy?
The blacksmiths leveled and polished the blanks' outer surfaces as the prince required. After the grinding stones, they were sent on without pause to the castle's backyard. By then, the 2 round, solid steel rods were a dark grey on the outside, giving off a weighty metallic luster. Roland could hardly wait. He swapped in the boring cutter and, together with Carter, fixed the cannon blank in place, so the cutter's tip pressed exactly at the center of the steel rod. Facing this historic moment, Roland pulled open the steam engine's valve. The cutter began to turn slowly, and before long rose to a steady speed.
Feed the cutter.
The chief knight pushed the sliding base, controlling the contact depth between blank and cutter. When the bit touched the barrel, the ear-piercing noise at once drowned out the steam engine's roar. Lard, serving as lubricant, was squeezed into the borehole. What came back out was black foam and curling wires of metal. The watching witches all withdrew from the wooden shed, only Lightning insisted on staying. To her, it seemed, these pitch-black machines were more beautiful than any scenery. Release That Witch. Episode 70. The Spy, Part 1. Groundhog Cole gazed anxiously out of the window. Once the snow started in this god-forsaken place, it never seemed to stop, and the sky looked like a bedsheet his grandmother had not washed in years, filthy and grey. Still, he had his own way of telling the time.
The militia's morning drill. Every day the weather allows, those fools run past the town square at the sparrow hour, 8 o'clock sharp. They were doing it before the months of demons, and they're still doing it now. Don't they know winter is for saving your strength? When the day comes to run for your lives, you'll be begging the gods for 2 extra legs. But thanks to those idiots, I know exactly when to make my move. That's right, I'm getting out of this bewitched town. The second prince ordered me to lurk in Border Town, watch Roland Wimbledon, the fourth prince, and send word back to Gold Flag City. But I won't stay 1 moment longer. Give it half a month, and I'll be sacrificed to the devil along with everyone else here. And that is no exaggeration. Since winter began, the strange things here never stop. The townsfolk don't notice, no surprise. They're ignorant country bumpkins who care for nothing but food and don't even hold the gods in their hearts. But I'm different. I'm Groundhog Cole. Sniffing out secrets and stealing intelligence are my best tricks. That's exactly why Prince Typheco hired me.
A city wall that burst out of the ground overnight. Iron rods that roared and knocked down demonic beasts. And neither of those compared to his greatest discovery.
The fourth prince of the kingdom is openly keeping witches. Merciful heavens, could anything be more absurd? If the prince hasn't been taken over by the devil, I can't think of any other explanation. If he wanted a witch for a fresh taste, he could lock her in the castle and do as he pleased. It wouldn't be the first time I'd heard of nobles hiding witches, playthings you can use as you like, and no one cares if they die. But flaunting them in public? That's another matter, entirely.
And this was no fantasy of his. He had seen it with his own eyes.
True to the creed of working for whoever pays, I strolled by the city wall whenever the snow was light, and the fourth prince was often there. I used to wonder what gave that useless playboy the nerve to stay in Border Town instead of scurrying back to Longsong's stronghold. Now I understand completely. Roland Wimbledon was replaced by a devil long ago. I saw the wall smashed open by a giant demonic beast, and the devil strike it down with thunder. Then a witch swallowed the swarming beasts in hellfire, and afterward she threw herself into the prince's arms. And not one man in the whole militia questioned it. And the rumor since, another witch who heals, someone's boy wounded and cured, some old woman across the street who slipped and broke her leg cured. Blasphemy. Taking a witch's healing, how is that different from taking the devil's corruption?
What finally settled it happened 2 days ago. He saw a witch fly out of the prince's castle, circle it twice, and fly back in.
The church fathers always say, a witch gains only one power from the devil. I've seen flames and flight with my own eyes, plus the healing rumors that makes 3 witches gathered in this tiny town. 3. There's no doubt. The devil has turned the Lord's castle into a nest of demons, and the people here are falling under its spell one by one. I have to get out. And I hold the secret of how that border wall went up so fast the alchemist's powder I scraped right off it. Offer that to the second prince, and he won't punish me. He'll shower me with rewards.
The more Cole thought about it, the more he regretted not returning to Longsong Stronghold with the evacuating nobles.
Leaving by land is hopeless. The winter storms bury every road, My only chance is the water route, the trading ship from Willowtown.
As Cole had observed, on the first day of every month, the Willowtown boat arrived with food, unloaded and loaded for 2 or 3 hours, then raised sail and left the dock. He had to slip aboard while it was here, or wait another month. And today happened to be the first of the month.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
The familiar chant rang out. Outside the window, a squad of young men in brown leather armor jogged past in high spirits. Anyone else would have been taken in by the hearty sight, not Cole.
Time to go.
He pulled on his fur coat, tightened the belt, and walked out of the wooden cabin. His neighbor was outside taking down dried fish and greeted him.
Out this early? I have to admit, the Lord may be possessed by a devil, but these fools live better than before. They even dare hang dried fish outside the door. When people are starving, they'll swallow a fish frozen hard as stone.
Cole had no time to answer. He watched the militia vanish at the west end of the street, then headed straight for the docks. The residents took him for the younger brother of Iron Paddle, come from Falling Dragon Ridge to visit family. All lies, of course. Before getting rid of Iron Paddle, he had asked the man's name and address, and settled in here playing his brother. Whether those fools believed the story, he never cared. The stone-paved road had been swept a few days earlier. Now the snow was over his shoes again. He kept an even pace to save strength. The footprints didn't worry him. Within a day the snow would cover them. Perhaps by the time he reached Gold Flag City, they would still be in the dark. Near the docks, Cole saw the ship he had been waiting for, the Willowtown sailboat. Sacks of wheat were being carried out of the hold, with guards standing watch. He touched his pocket. 2 gold dragons and 16 silver wolves, everything he owned. 6 guards. Silver wolves wouldn't tempt them, and 2 gold dragons weren't enough to go around, so his eyes fell on the porters.
The stacked cargo makes perfect blind spots. Knocking out a porter and taking his place is exactly my kind of job. Once I'm aboard, a gold dragon will convince the captain to hide me 9 times out of 10. It works.
Just as Cole was about to move, a shout rose behind him.
You there! Don't move! Damn it.
He turned his head. Several militiamen were coming straight for him, and from the sides more men were closing in. He was surrounded.
No way out. Fine. In my trade, you never resist stubbornly. Spill everything about your employer, and you usually walk away alive. Or they even hire you back at a higher price.
Cole raised both hands high and dropped to his knees.
Take the money. Do the job. That is Groundhog Cole's principle too. What I don't understand is, how did they find me?